Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, Philippine unemployment rate for August comes in at 3.9%. That's lower than July's 5.3%, the highest level since August 2022. The 9 September inflation drive bargain hunting. Will stock market gains continue ahead of the Monetary Board's policy decision tomorrow, Thursday? Mark Angeles, FVP and Equity Research Division Head of First Metro Securities, joins us live. And the World Bank maintains its growth outlook for the Philippines this year and the next, despite global uncertainties. The Philippine Statistics Authority announces fewer Filipinos were unemployed in August compared to the previous month. The unemployment rate fell to 3.9% in August from 5.3% in July. This translates to around 2 million individuals. The figure was also lower than August of last year at 4%. Underemployment likewise fell to 10.7%, or around 5.4 million individuals, from nearly 15% in July. As for employment, it rose to 96% in August, up from the figure of 94.7% the previous month. This translates to over 50 million employed individuals. The Makati Business Club warns that corruption continues to weigh heavily on the Philippine economy, crippling competitiveness and driving investors away. MBC Executive Director Rafael Apaongpin told the Big Story, corruption has gone beyond being a governance issue, calling it an economic crisis that threatens growth. He noted that this has discouraged foreign investors who refuse to let their capital be tainted by graft, citing a recent U.S. State Department report that flagged the Philippines for pervasive corruption. The business group also said that the government's ongoing infrastructure probe must ensure accountability, but with caution.
It makes us even more uncompetitive.
Yeah.
You know, already we're uncompetitive in so many ways. But you know, it is really a crisis that will impact us economically. We want to see some big fish. Let's not be too hasty. You really have to play this well. Otherwise, you're gonna disrupt governance.
The World Bank has maintained its growth outlook for the Philippines for this year and next amid global uncertainties. In its latest East Asia and Pacific Economic Update report, the multilateral lender kept its forecast of 5.3% growth for 2025 and 5.4% for 2026, unchanged from its earlier projections last June. Both figures fall below the government's targets, but still place the Philippines among the region's fastest-growing economies, behind Vietnam and Mongolia. The World Bank said growth will be supported by robust domestic demand, easing inflation, lower interest rates, and continued public infrastructure spending. To cut or to hold? That is the question over the next 24 hours as investors monitor the Monetary Board's policy meeting tomorrow, Thursday, where they decide on whether to ease further or pause. Two of those we interviewed on this program following September's 1.7% inflation print shared mixed views.
The target's still between 2 to 4%, and since it's below 2%, it gives them more room. And you know, if the Fed will continue to probably cut policy rates also, then definitely that gives more room for the BSP to do further cuts.
We're still in a very good environment despite the recent uptick in inflation in the past 2 months. So at least it gives the BSP some ample room to ease further this year. So our call is a hold this month.
Our Business World survey of 16 economists showed 6 of them tipped for a 25 basis point cut in Thursday's meeting. The rest expect a pause. Well, with us now for more is Mark Angeles, First Vice President and Equity Research Division Head at First Metro Securities. Good to have you back with us, Mark. Welcome to the program.
Nice to be here again, Kathy.
So you weren't part of that survey. So
Oh,
what
we weren't.
are you tipping for in the next 24 hours?
Well, I think the BSP has room to cut. However, given the current macro scenario, I think the economy is not going to fall off a cliff anytime soon. And at the same time, the peso is on the weaker side versus the US dollar. And I think they can wait a little bit, pause this round, and maybe resume cutting sometime next meeting, especially once there's some clarity on what the Fed is going to do. And that will allow a little bit of strength or somewhat stabilization on the currency.
So they can wait, but if they do cut, what kind of conversations do you think would come around in the policy meeting if it weren't going to be unanimous? Just as the survey says, 6 out of 16 expect a cut. So that's still a minority.
Correct. Well, I guess I recall one interview with Ramalona, right? He mentioned that they can cut in order to support the economy. So if they do cut, right now we're not seeing anything in terms of weakness in the economy. Maybe they're seeing something else, right? And then that's something that we will take note if they do cut next round. But I think for now, given the unemployment numbers came in a little normalized from a very weak July, right? Then I think they can pause a little bit and take a look at the data and then take a look at the currency, what's happening, especially what happened in Japan, right? So you're seeing a lot of those currency movements affecting the Philippine peso. And another thing, the dollar has been weak versus any other currencies except for the peso. So they do have a room to pause a little bit this round and maybe resume when the Fed starts cutting again.
Well, I did have a conversation with him about 2 weeks ago, and he made a mention of the risk of a sharper slowdown in growth
Yes.
and a sharper slowdown in output. And we did see output fall in the latest PMI data.
Correct.
And multilateral lenders have either cut or kept forecasts, ADB, World Bank, IMF. So in terms of supporting growth, what are the chances that there might be more of an incentive to cut now to preempt slower growth?
Well, if you look at the PMI, right, I mean, there could be weather-related, also part of the tariffs. That's one. But the other data that we're seeing, inflation is a little bit okay. Unemployment, as I mentioned earlier, unemployment came in really strong. And you don't look at third quarter as a basis right now, given the number of storms that we had to go through this quarter already. So it could be a seasonal thing in terms of data blip, but it remains, for us, at least from the consumption side, it remains to be somewhat anchored in terms of the jobs and also in terms of inflation. So in terms of a sharp slowdown, that could be sometime next year, perhaps, if the BSP is seeing that. But for now, we're still looking at a 5.6, 5.7 GDP growth. We're still on the lower side versus everyone else to begin with.
You started the year with the forecast that the PSEI would
Yes.
rally to 7,600, and then in April, you cut that back to 6,700.
6.9,
6.9.
yes.
Are you working on trying to revise that or keeping to that until the end of the year?
Well, if you look at the way our forecast index, right, it's always a bear, base, and bull case. Right now, the market is pricing in our bear case scenario. And I think, given it's already September, I think there's no point in really adjusting that number already because we're very close. But I don't want to say hopeful, right, of a rally sometime at the end of the year. But if you look at how we position our strategy in April, we put in we recommended a barbell strategy because it was very difficult doing that. Even now, you know that the economy is good, but you do have a lot of risks, especially from Trump policies and also now the corruption probe. And that kind of outweighs what is happening in terms of the fundamentals with the Philippines. And what we think at the moment is that during that time, that you have to hedge yourself if the investors see that the economy is good and then look past what's happening on the sidelines, like the negative risk, then all those cyclical names will rally. But if the bearish side does somewhat weigh down all those positives, then you have to go to the dividend names. And so far, that portfolio, that strategy was meant to outperform even in view of a bear market or a or a bull market. And so far, our dividend names have done so well, surprisingly, in this environment.
How come surprisingly? I mean, if you were to talk about the yields,
Yes.
dividend yielding names, then they do pretty well in a market where interest rates were coming off.
Correct.
Further.
But if you look at the cyclical names, they dropped significantly as well. So those dividend names that we recommended, like Pure Gold back then, even Wilcon, AREIT, RCR, MREIT, and PLDT to some extent, right? I mean, out of the 6 names, dividend names that we recommended, they've done so well, especially for Pure Gold and Wilcon.
Under this scenario that we have investor perception issues, I mean,
Yes.
economic growth forecasts have barely changed for now, but soon enough, when investors perceive that it's not safe to invest in the Philippines, how then do you advise your clients?
Well, that's for next year's outlook.
But for the last half of, well, the last 3 months of this year at
Yes.
6,700, I
Yeah.
mean, how can they ensure that they don't lose the money they could have had?
Well, right now, if you look at the PEs, right, they are very low levels. Even in the equity risk premium, it's already at levels where you are in a similar to the 2007 global financial crisis. So it's reflecting crisis levels ERP, whereas we don't see a crisis at the moment in the Philippines. So that's that's something that we do recognize, and I think the negative sentiment has spilled over to that extent that the ERP has shot up significantly, and we think at these levels, even at 6,000 or below 6,000, it's a good time to accumulate if you are looking for a more long-term perspective in the market. But then again, right, we do acknowledge that the corruption probe is something that could tip the market further downwards. And eventually, it will impact the fundamentals in terms of confidence, right? So you're now affecting investor confidence. Eventually, it will go to the business confidence and the consumer confidence if they don't put a backstop to it right now.
So if you have a bear case scenario, what is the barest of the bear then? I mean, no economic crisis for now for you, but the Makati Business Club says it already is.
Well, the bears have borrowed 5,000, but assuming we do have a full-blown economic crisis, but so far that's not in our cards at the moment, and our bear case already reflects a very significant uptick into your equity risk premium.
Dividend yielding stocks then, that's one in the bag, but what about the corporate bond issuances? Because a lot of companies are coming out with that and yields are looking pretty good. Would that be an alternative if they wanted to add on more risk or a little bit more of a nuanced risk apart from dividend yielding
actually,
stocks?
right now those dividend names, the bond listings are somewhat very attractive. If I were investors, I would lock them in right now, knowing that yields gonna fall. Knowing that yields gonna fall eventually in the next 12 months, given our view of rate cuts. Right, yields are pretty high, around 6% for most of those names that are issuing bonds, and good quality companies as well. So not much to fear in terms of investing in them, and I think they can augment your portfolio if you add a little bit of those bond listings or bond issuances in your portfolio.
Okay,
Yeah.
talk to us about the final IPO of the year. Ramon Monzon said it's going to be the last, Maynilad. What do you make of it?
Well, so far, the dividend yield is quite high at 6%. So it is attractive to a lot of investors already. And you do have a lot of anchor investors that have expressed, that will support the prices. So unfortunately, it's the last one. We're hoping for more listings. But then again, given the market condition, it is pretty good that they were able to get those anchor investors in, given where we are given the market conditions right now.
All right, so just to recap, PSEI by the end of the year?
I'm still looking at 6.9, but hoping that the term now is hope. But it could rally, especially if we see this corruption probe. They put a backstop to it, right? The government does something that will revive investor confidence. Then, given the fundamentals, given how cheap the market is, I think there's room to rally.
And interest rate differentials as well as the peso.
Well, right now we have 75 bips between the versus the U.S. policy rates. The historical one is around 200 bips. So that's why I think the BSP can wait a little bit. If they cut now, that interest differential will tighten up again to 50 bips, and that will have an impact on where the peso is versus the US dollar.
All right. Well, we're 24 hours down the line to that decision. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cathy.
See how it goes, if they can wait.
They can wait.
Mark Angeles of First Metro Securities. And you're watching Money Talks. Coming up, the Philippine Stock Exchange President and CEO Ramon Monzon hopes Maynilad's upcoming IPO will spur market interest. And San Miguel Corporation has been fined by the SEC for a misstatement. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. U.S. stocks ended lower Tuesday as investors were left without key economic data amid the ongoing government shutdown. The Nasdaq led losses, slipping by about 0.7%. S&P 500 likewise fell nearly 0.4%, and the Dow declined by around 0.2%. The benchmark 10-year Treasury yields ticked down to 4.126%. And gold prices hit a new high at $4,004 per troy ounce. Gold soared above $4,000 for the first time as investors sought a safe place to park their money during the continuing U.S. government shutdown and the political crisis in France. U.S. futures point to slight gains when the markets open later tonight Manila time. The Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq all up by about 0.1% each. As for the Asian markets, they are a mixed bag this Wednesday. South Korea's Kospi and Japan's Nikkei 225 both up by about 0.25%, and Australia's ASX 200 is down by 0.2%. Let's take a quick check on the Philippine markets. PSEI opens this Wednesday higher by about 0.2%, 6,094. The local bourse bounced back Tuesday as investors welcomed September inflation data, which came in within the Bangko Central's forecast range. The broader all-shares index also rose by about 0.1%, with all of the local counters ending in the green. As for the Philippine peso, it opens today a tad weaker, 58.205 to the dollar. Peso strengthened against the dollar Tuesday, closing at 58.10. As the markets priced in expectations, the Bangko Sentral may pause in its easing cycle this week, despite slower than expected inflation. And the 10-year government bond yields have ticked up to 6.064%. Now, the Philippine Stock Exchange President and CEO Ramon Monzon is hoping Maynilad's upcoming initial public offering will spur interest and encourage more companies to go public. Monzon expects Maynilad's maiden issuance later this month to be in the final IPO for this year. Maynilad targets to list on the main board of the PSE on November 7 and trade its shares using the stock symbol MYNLD. Monzon said the prospect of Maynilad's 45 billion peso IPO, which is one of the biggest maiden offerings in PSE history, has also been bolstered by the numerous cornerstone investors that have agreed to support the capital raising activity. Maynilad's IPO will be the second maiden offering this year, following Topline Business Development Corp's 732.6 million peso IPO in April. Metro Pacific Tollways Corporation is planning to raise up to 20 billion pesos through a bond issuance to fund ongoing tollway projects and refinance existing loan facilities. The company said the offering will consist of 15 billion pesos in fixed-rate bonds with an oversubscription option of up to 5 billion pesos under tenors of 3, 5, and 10 years. It also said proceeds from the offer will be used to partially finance the Cavitex, Calax, and LLX projects, as well as settle bridge loans and general expenses. The offer period is targeted to run from November 17 to 21, while the bonds are expected to be issued and listed on the Philippine Dealing and Exchange Corporation on December 2. San Miguel Corporation has been fined by the Securities and Exchange Commission for a misstatement. Based on the SEC's General Accountant Office, the misstatement pertains to the incorrect classification of cash outflow related to the acquisition of property, plant, and equipment under operating activities. That's instead of being under investing activities, as provided under Philippine accounting standards. SMC was imposed a penalty of 1 million pesos and directed to update the said financial information. SMC said they will comply with the SEC's directive and will pay the penalty. The SEC has also filed a show cause order to eValue Philippines. That's to explain its valuation efforts to the assets owned by the Villar Land Group. eValue, appraiser of Villar Land, reported a 1.33 trillion peso total value of Villar Properties, Althorpe Land, Chalgrove Properties, and Los Valores Corporation. Villar Land, however, said the release of their 2024 audited financial statements was delayed after its external auditor, Punong Bayan and Araulio, did not accept eValue's valuation. The SEC order stems from their continuing probe into Villar Land's delayed submissions of audited financial statements in violation of the Securities Regulation Code. And before we go, Justice Secretary Boying Rimulya has been named by President Bongbong Marcos as the country's new ombudsman. His appointment comes despite past controversies and at a time when the office faces sensitive cases involving high-ranking officials. Here's the report.
Despite doubts, President Bongbong Marcos has chosen Justice Secretary Boying Rimulya as the new ombudsman. Rimulya's path to the position wasn't easy. He once faced a complaint filed by Senator Amy Marcos over the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte, a case that was eventually dismissed by the ombudsman. Now, Rimulya himself takes on the role of the people's watchdog. He promises transparency and accountability.
Magkakaroon ng ganong mga media office, I think that there will be more interviews and more news coming from the Ombudsman's office. Sapagkat yung tao naghahanap talaga ng transparency and accountability sa taong bayan. At nung hiningi ko yung trabahong ito, yun ang sa isip ko talaga na yung accountability mapalakas natin sa lahat. Bukod sa iba pang mga tungkulin na pwede nating gampanan.
According to Rimulya, President Marcos himself ordered him to hold corrupt officials accountable.
Sabi niya, yung accountability of public officers, pangalagaan mo talaga. At hinahanap ng taong bayan yan. At ako naman siyempre, yun naman ang hinahanap kong trabaho eh. Yun ang aking hiningin trabaho sa kanya. Kaya nagkasundo naman kami dyan. Noong naging DOJ Secretary ako, ang unang-una kong tinanggal, weaponization ng batas. And it will not be weaponized. Sisiguraduhin ko sa lahat yan. Wala itong sisinuhin. Ang trabaho ng ombudsman para sa buong Pilipinas, hindi sa isang kampo ng politika. Kaya wala tayong sisinuhin dito.
Remulla carries a heavy responsibility. He will handle cases against government officials from administrative to criminal. The Independent Commission for Infrastructure is set to submit evidence to the Ombudsman over anomalous flood control projects which could lead to cases before the Sandigan Bayan. Remulla says he won't allow delay tactics in handling cases. He will also oversee complaints against Vice President Sara Duterte involving alleged misuse of over 600 million pesos in confidential funds in OVP.
Nandiyan na yan eh. Actually, nandiyan na naman sa ombudsman ang mga report na yan. At bubuklatin natin. Pag-aaralan at tatanungin natin yung mga may hawak doon ngayon. Mga may hawak at yung may tungkulin na hawakan ng mga kasong yon bago tayo dumating.
He also supports lifestyle checks and the public disclosure of officials' sell-ins as long as the process is legal. Malacanang meanwhile defended his appointment.
We have the highest confidence in Secretary Remulla. I wouldn't say that he's the most controversial. As I said, there is a vetting process which is provided for by our Constitution and our laws, and he went through that very rigorous process. At the end of the day, after the President receives the recommendation from the JVC, it's still the decision of the President.
On Thursday, Remulla is set to take his oath as the new ombudsman. At the Department of Justice, Undersecretary Frederick Vida will serve as officer in charge. For News 5, Camille Samonte, We Are One News.
That is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. Have a great day ahead.